In just about 30 minutes, parents and the community will be getting a chance to weigh in on the Wichita School District's plan to close some of its buildings by the end of the school year.
This, the first of 3 listening sessions, starts at 5:30 at Marshall Middle School. The Wichita School Board then will vote on a plan next month. Sean Logging talked with some voicing opposition to this plan. Sean?
Mike, Rachel, Cleveland Traditional Magnet is one of the 6 schools being considered for closure. The district says it's taking this route, prioritizing people over places. The district is trying to address a $42 million budget shortfall, so by closing the 6 schools, it will allow them to save at least $16 million without layoffs. While a building, school represents community.
My initial reaction was shock because I was under the assumption that Cleveland was one of the better funded magnet schools that was in great building condition.
Ruth Lehman's daughter attends kindergarten at Cleveland Traditional Magnet.
What it means is a quality education.
The back of Ruth's car presenting her position that she doesn't want to see Cleveland close.
It's very important that people in the community get as informed as possible about the effects of this.
Cleveland, along with Clark, Park, and Payne Elementaries, Hadley Middle School, and Jardine Magnet Middle are under consideration for closure. The district using factors like building maintenance costs, staffing shortages, and declining enrollment as part of the consideration.
Oh, it's very rushed.
Walt Chappell, a former state BOE member, is voicing his opposition to this plan.
I'm a former teacher. My parents were teachers in this school districts. My daughter, one of them, teaches. And we have all seen how important it is to build relationships with parents and each student. If you close a school, all those relationships disappear.
Walt says he wants a better explanation of the budget and shortfall, pointing to the cash balance of the current year budget proposal filed with the state, and questions what savings will be provided by closing schools.
That doesn't add up. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered before we start making any drastic decisions.
Parents and the community can provide feedback before the March 4th vote by the Wichita School Board, and Ruth wants people to speak up.
It's very important that the community comes out together in order to work together as one voice to make sure that our schools don't close down, Cleveland included.
Kansas law does set out a process that has to be followed by school districts to close a school building, and that is being followed by the Wichita Public Schools district in this case. Now, that includes the required public meeting, which will be happening next week before the board makes its decision. Now, there is also a 45-day window after that decision is made where a review can be requested by the State Board of Education if 5% of voters in that school district sign on to have that review conducted.